Ages of Man. Sir John Gielgud stars in the one-man Shakespearian program held as a masterpiece. Here is Ages of Man Part 1, from Shakespeare's plays and sonnets in solo performance, Sir John Gielgud.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good cape onlined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cuts, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again towards childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
In A Midsummer Night's Dream, it has often seemed to me that the fairy characters have something of the grace and the waywardness of children. Here Oberon, king of the fairies, jealous of his queen Titania, gives orders to his little henchman. My gentle Puck, come hither. Thou rememberest, since once I sat upon a promontory and heard a mermaid on a dolphin's back uttering such dulcet and harmonious breath that the rude sea grew civil at her song, and certain stars shot madly from their spheres to hear the sea maid's music. That very time I saw, but thou couldst not, flying between the cold moon and the earth, Cupid all armed. A certain aim he took at a fair vestal throned by the west, and loosed his love shaft smartly from his bow, as it should pierce 100,000 hearts. But I might see young Cupid's fiery shaft quenched in the chaste beams of the watery moon, and the imperial votaress passed on in maiden meditation, fancy free. Yet marked I where the bolt of Cupid fell. It fell upon a little western flower, before milk white, now purple with love's wound, and maidens call it love in idleness. Fetch me that flower, the herb I showed thee once. The juice of it, on sleeping eyelids laid, will make or man or woman madly dote upon the next live creature that it sees. Fetch me that herb, and be thou here again ere the Leviathan can swim a league. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows, quite over-canopied with luscious woodbine, with sweet musk roses and with eglantine. There sleeps Titania some time of the night, lulled in these flowers with dances and delight. And there the snake throws her enameled skin weed wide enough to wrap a fairy in, And with the juice of this, I'll streak her eyes and make her full of hateful fantasies. Shakespeare always loved fairy tales. And all through the plays, he is creating magical characters and fabulous happenings. In his very last play, The Tempest, he creates Caliban, the monster, half fish, half human. And he's something of a comic character at the beginning of the play. But in the scene when the jester and the butler from the king's wreck find him on the shore and make him tipsy with wine for the first time, the monster suddenly seems to have immortal longings in him. Be not afeard. The isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about mine ears, and sometimes voices that if I had then waked after long sleep will make me sleep again. And then in dreaming, the clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me. And when I waked, I cried to dream again. In Romeo and Juliet, Mercutio is a coarse-mouthed, swaggering, realistic character, but he also has a streak of poetic fantasy in him, which makes him a fitting friend for Romeo, the true hero of the play. Halfway through the tragedy, Mercutio is killed in a duel, and we actors sometimes think that Shakespeare had to kill him off that way, because otherwise he'd have spoiled Romeo's part altogether. Here, on their way to the Capulets' ball, where Romeo is so soon to fall in love with Juliet for the first time, Mercutio chaffs him about his imagined love for Rosaline. Oh, then I see Queen Mab has been with you. She is the fairies' midwife, and she comes in shape no bigger than an agate stone on the forefinger of an alderman, drawn with a team of little atomies athwart men's noses as they lie asleep. Her wagon spokes, made of long spinner's legs, the covers of the wings of grasshoppers, the traces of the smallest spider's web, the collars of the moonshine's watery beams, her whip of cricket's bone, the lash of film. Her wagoner, a small grey-coated gnat, not half so big as a round little worm pricked from the lazy finger of a maid. Her chariot is an empty hazelnut made by the joiner's squirrel or old grub, time out of mind the fairies' coachmakers. And in this state, she gallops, night by night, through lovers' brains, and then they dream of love. Or courtiers' knees, who dream on curtsies straight. Or lawyers' fingers, who straight dream on fees. Or ladies' lips, who straight on kisses dream, which oft the angry mab with blisters plagues, because their breaths with sweetmeats tainted are. Sometimes she gallops on a courtier's nose, and then dreams he of smelling out a suit. And sometimes comes she with a tithe pig's tail tickling a parson's nose as a lies asleep. Then dreams he of another benefice. Sometimes she driveth for a soldier's neck, and then dreams he of cutting foreign throats, of breaches, ambuscados, Spanish blades, of healths 5 fathom deep, and then anon drums in his ear, at which he starts and wakes, and being thus frighted, swears a prayer or two and sleeps again. This is that very mab that plats the manes of horses in the night, and bakes the elf-locks in foul sluttish hairs, which once untangled much misfortune bodes. This is the hag, when maids lie on their backs, that presses them and learns them first to bear, making them women of good carriage. Shakespeare had no scenery in his theatre, and as you know, the plays were written to be acted in the open air by daylight. But this hardly seemed to matter to a man who, with a few strokes of his pen, could so easily create day or night, summer or winter, Arden, Illyria or Elsinore. In the last act of The Merchant of Venice, after the great bustling trial scene in which Portia, disguised as a lawyer, saves the merchant Antonio from Shylock's knife, we are immediately transported back to her country house at Belmont by the sea. And there, under the summer moon, 2 young lovers are walking together with their arms entwined. Lorenzo and the beautiful Jessica, Shylock's daughter, with whom he has eloped from Venice. and close by the musicians are playing in the open air. The moon shines bright in such a night as this, when the sweet wind did gently kiss the trees and they did make no noise. In such a night, Troilus, methinks, mounted the Trojan walls and sighed his soul towards the Grecian tents where Cressid lay that night. In such a night stood Dido with a willow in her hand upon the wild sea banks and waft her love to come again to Carthage. In such a night did pretty Jessica, like a little shrew, slander her love, and he forgave it her. How sweet the moonlight sleeps upon this bank. Here will we sit and let the sounds of music creep in our ears. Soft stillness in the night become the touches of sweet harmony. Sit, Jessica. Look how the floor of heaven is thick inlaid with patines of bright gold. There's not the smallest orb which thou beholdst, but in his motion like an angel sings, still choiring to the young-eyed cherubims. Such harmony is in immortal souls, but whilst this muddy vesture of decay doth grossly close it in, we cannot hear it. The man that hath no music in himself, nor is not moved by concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. The motions of his spirit are dull as night, and his affections dark as Erebus. Let no such man be trusted. Mark the music. But in a very different mood, Benedick, the hero of Much Ado About Nothing, who thinks he has no time for women, sits on a fine afternoon in Leonato's garden in Sicily, musing on the strange behavior of his young friend Claudio, who appears to have fallen desperately in love. I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool when he dedicates his behaviors to love, will, after he hath laughed at such shallow follies in others, become the argument of his own scorn by falling in love. And such a man is Claudio. I have known when there was no music with him but the drum and the fife, and now had he rather hear the tabor and the pipe. I have known when he'd have walked 10 mile afoot to see a good armor, and now will he lie 10 nights awake carving the fashion of a new doublet. He was wont to speak plain and to the purpose like an honest man and a soldier, and now is he turned orthographer. His words are a very fantastical banquet, just so many strange dishes. May I be so converted and see with these eyes? I cannot tell. I think not. I will not be sworn, but love may transform me to an oyster. But I'll take my oath on it, till he have made an oyster of me, he shall never make me such a fool. One woman is fair, yet I am well. Another is wise, yet I am well. Another virtuous, yet I am well. But till all graces be in one woman shall not come in my grace. Rich she shall be, that's certain. Wise, or I'll none. Virtuous, or I'll never cheapen her. Fair, or I'll never look on her. Mild, or come not near me. Noble, or not I for an angel. Of good discourse, an excellent musician, and our hair shall be of what color it please God. Here are 2 sonnets, one to love and one to married love. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. But the poet could sometimes be rather cynical, even on this important subject. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses, damask, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go, my mistress when she walks treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she, belied with false compare. As Shakespeare had no scenery in his theatre, so he had no actresses either. And this would seem at first to have been rather a severe handicap to a man who was proposing to write two of the great love stories in our language, Antony and Cleopatra and Romeo and Juliet. But Shakespeare was too great a craftsman, too clever a man of the theatre, to risk embarrassing his audiences or the young boys who played the women's parts in his company by presenting them in scenes of intimate physical passion. So he chooses episodes in which the emotional impact is greatly heightened by the meetings and partings of the lovers, who are actually very seldom alone together on the stage. Here in Romeo and Juliet, the young Romeo, disguised as he is of the house of Montague, comes with his friends to the Capulets' ball. They are gate crashers. He suddenly sees Juliet, the daughter of the Capulets, dancing with the Count of Paris, whom her parents intend that she shall marry.
What lady is that, which doth enrich the hand of yonder knight? Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows as yonder lady o'er her fellows shows. The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and touching hers make blessed my rude hand. Did my heart love till now, forswear its sights, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night.
Leaving the ball with his friends, Romeo gives them the slip and vaults the wall of the Capulets' garden.
Can I go forward when my heart is here? Turn back, dull earth, and find thy center out. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she.
Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off.
It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I am too bold, 'tis not to me she speaks. Two of the fairest stars in all the heavens, having some business, to entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight doth a lamp. Her eyes in heaven would through the airy regions stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. She speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night, being o'er my head, as is a winged messenger of heaven unto the white, upturned, wondering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him, as he bestrides the lazy pacing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air. Romeo and Juliet are married secretly, but Romeo, unluckily involved in a street brawl, stabs Juliet's cousin Tybalt to death, and so is banished from Verona. The lovers spend one short night of passion together, but as dawn breaks, they part on the same balcony where they plighted their troth only 24 hours before. It was the lark, the herald of the morn, no nightingale. Look, love, what envious streaks do lace the severing clouds in yonder east. Night's candles are burnt out, and jocund day stands tiptoe on the misty mountain tops. I must be gone and live, or stay and die. Let me be ta'en, let me be put to death. I am content so thou wilt have it so. I say yon grey is not the morning's eye, 'tis but the pale reflex of Cynthia's brow. Nor that is not the lark whose notes do beat the vaulty heaven so high above our heads. I have more care to stay than will to go. Come, death, and welcome. Juliet wills it so. How is't, my soul? Let's talk. It is not day. From the meetings and partings of lovers to the love made hideous by jealousy. The tragicomedy of A Winter's Tale has only just begun when we find King Leontes of Sicilia in the throes of an insensate passion, as he watches his wife, the Queen Hermione, saying farewell to King Polixenes, the head of a neighboring country who has come on a state visit. Polixenes and Leontes were friends in boyhood, and now meeting as grown men, there's been feasting and ceremonial. But as the stranger king makes ready to depart, Leontes, with his obsessed imagination, is convinced that Hermione and Polixenes are lovers. Too hot to mingle friendship far is mingling bloods. I have tremor cordis on me. My heart dances, but not for joy, not joy. This entertainment may a free face put on, derive a liberty from heartiness, from bounty's fertile bosom, and well become the agent. May, I grant, but to be paddling palms and pinching fingers as now they are, and making practiced smiles as in a looking glass, and then to sigh as 'twere the mort of the deer. Oh, that is entertainment my bosom likes not, nor my brows. Is whispering nothing, is leaning cheek to cheek, is meeting noses, kissing with inside lip, stopping the career of laughter with a sigh, a note infallible of breaking honesty, horsing foot on foot. skulking in corners, wishing clocks more swift, hours, minutes, noon, midnight, and all eyes blind with a pin and web but theirs only that would unseen be wicked. Is this nothing? Why then the world and all that since is nothing? The covering sky is nothing. Bohemia nothing. My wife is nothing. Nor nothing have these nothings, if this be nothing. The expense of spirit in a waste of shame is lust in action. And till action, lust is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust, enjoyed no sooner but despised straight, past reason hunted, and no sooner had, past reason hated, as a swallowed bait on purpose laid to make the taker mad. Mad in pursuit and in possession so, having and in quest to have extreme, a bliss in proof, and proved a very woe. Before a joy proposed, behind a dream. All this the world well knows, yet none knows well to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. And the prim, self-righteous deputy, Angelo, in Measure for Measure, governing Vienna in the absence of the good duke, mercilessly condemns to death a young man who has got a girl with child. The boy has a sister, Isabella, a novice about to enter a convent, and she comes to Angelo imploring him to have mercy on her brother's life. Angelo at first refuses coldly, but as he continues talking to her, he suddenly begins to find himself strangely fascinated by her innocence and beauty. And as she turns despairingly to the door, he calls her back and bids her come again tomorrow. What's this? What's this? Is this her fault or mine? The tempter or the tempted, who sins most, ah? Not she, nor doth she tempt, that it is I, that lying by the violet in the sun do as the carrion does, not as the flower, corrupt with virtuous season. Can it be that modesty may more betray our sense than woman's lightness? Having waste ground enough, shall we desire to raise the sanctuary and pitch our evils there? Oh, fie, fie, fie. Dost thou, or what art thou, Angelo? Dost thou desire her foully for those things that make her good? Oh, let her brother live. Thieves for their robbery have authority when judges steal themselves. What do I love her, that I desire to hear her speak again and feast upon her eyes? What didst I dream of? Oh, cunning enemy, that to catch a saint with saints dost bait thy hook. Most dangerous is that temptation that doth goad us on to sin in loving virtue. Never could the strumpet with all her double vigor, art and nature once stir my temper. But this virtuous maid subdues me quite. Ever till now, when men were fond, I smiled and wondered how.
We now return to Sir John Gielgud in his internationally acclaimed one-man Shakespearean program, Ages of Man, Part 1.
The inspiration of Shakespeare's sonnets has always been something of a mystery. All we know for certain is that some were written to a handsome young man, Shakespeare's friend and patron, and others to a dark lady. Here in two of the early sonnets, the poet writes to his young friend, begging him to marry and have children. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow and dig deep trenches in thy beauty's field, thy youth's proud livery, so gazed on now, will be a tattered weed of small worth held. Then being asked where all thy beauty lies, where all the treasure of thy lusty days, to say within thine own deep sunken eyes were an all-eating shame and thriftless praise. How much more praise deserved thy beauty's use if thou couldst answer, this fair child of mine shall sum my count and make my old excuse, proving his beauty by succession thine. This were to be new made when thou art old, and see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. When I do count the clock that tells the time, and see the brave day sunk in hideous night, when I behold the violet past prime, and sable curls all silvered o'er with white, when lofty trees I see barren of leaves, which erst from heat did canopy the herd, and summer's green all girded up in sheaves, borne on the bier with white and bristly beard, then of thy beauty do I question make, that thou among the wastes of time must go, since sweets and beauties do themselves forsake, and die as fast as they see others grow. And nothing gainst time's scythe can make defense, save breed to brave him when he takes thee hence.
All Shakespeare's comedies are full of music. Here are the lyrics from some of his songs. From Twelfth Night. O mistress mine, where are you roaming? O stay and hear your true love's coming, that can sing both high and low. Trip no further, pretty sweeting, journey's end in lovers' meeting, every wise man's son doth know. What is love? 'Tis not hereafter. Present mirth hath present laughter. What's to come is still unsure. In delay there lies no plenty. Then come kiss me, sweet and 20. Youth's a stuff will not endure. From As You Like It. Blow, blow, thou winter wine. Thou art not so unkind as man's ingratitude. Thy tooth is not so keen, because thou art not seen, although thy breath be rude. Freeze, freeze, thou bitter sky, thou dost not bite so nigh as benefits forgot. Though thou the waters warp, thy sting is not so sharp as friend remembered not. And from The Tempests. Come unto these yellow sands, and then take hands, curtsied when you have, and kissed the wild waves whist. Footed featly here and there, and sweet sprites the burden bear. Hark, hark, the watchdogs bark. Hark, hark, I hear the strain of strutting chanticleer cry, cock-a-doodle-doo. Full fathom 5, thy father lies. Of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that wear his eyes. Nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer sea change into something rich and strange. Sea nymphs hourly ring his knell. Hark, now I hear them, ding, dong, bell. The poet always seems to express the essence of his characters from the very moment when they first appear upon the stage. Here in the opening scene of Henry IV, Part 1, young Harry Percy, known as Hotspur, comes to the King's Court at Westminster to answer a charge of insubordination in a recent battle. Liege, I did deny no prisoners. But I remember when the fight was done, when I was dry with rage and extreme toil, breathless and faint, leaning upon my sword, came there a certain lord, neat and trimly dressed, fresh as a bridegroom, and his chin, new reaped, showed like a stubble land at harvest home. He was perfumed like a milliner, and twixt his finger and his thumb he held a pouncet box, which ever and anon he gave his nose and took away again, who therewith angry, when it next came there, took it in snuff, and still he smiled and talked. And as the soldiers bore dead bodies by, he called them untaught knaves, unmannerly to bring a slovenly, unhandsome course betwixt the wind and his nobility. With many holiday and lady terms he questioned me. Among the rest demanded my prisoners in your majesty's behalf. I then, all smarting, with my wounds being cold, to be so pestered with a popinjay, out of my grief and my impatience, answered neglectingly, I know not what he should or he should not, for he made me mad to see him shine so brisk and smell so sweet, and talk so like a waiting gentlewoman, of guns and drums and wounds, God save the mark, and telling me the sovereignest thing on earth was parmacetti for an inward bruise, and that it was great pity, so it was, that villainous saltpeter should be digged out of the bowels of the harmless earth, which many a good tall fellow had destroyed so cowardly, and but for these vile guns, he would himself have been a soldier. This bald, unjointed chat of his, my lord, I answered indirectly as I said, and I beseech you, let not his report come current for an accusation betwixt my love and your high majesty.
But if the poet loves his soldiers and heroes and braggarts, how wonderfully he understands the terrors and susceptibility of his weaker characters. Here are two of his weak kings. The first, Henry VI, the scholar king, fighting with his fiery Queen Margaret and the other nobles in the Battle of Towton, is pushed out of the front line like a naughty schoolboy. And sitting in a field nearby, he muses sadly on the responsibilities of kingship and longs for imagined pastoral joys. Oh God, methinks it were a happy life to be no better than a homeless swain. To sit upon a hill, as I do now, to carve out dials quaintly, point by point, thereby to see the minutes how they run, how many make the hours full complete, how many hours bring about the day, how many days will finish up the year, how many years a mortal man may live. When this is known, then to divide the times. So many hours must I tend my flock, so many hours must I take my rest, so many hours must I contemplate, so many hours must I sport myself. So many days my ewes have been with young, so many weeks ere the poor fools will eat, so many months ere I shall shear the fleece. So minutes, hours, days, months, and years passed over to the end they were created, would bring white hairs unto a quiet grave. Ah, what a life were this! How sweet, how lovely. Gives not the hawthorn bush a sweeter shade to shepherds looking on their silly sheep than doth a rich embroidered canopy to kings that fear their subjects' treachery? Oh, yes, it doth, 1,000-fold it doth. And to conclude, the shepherd's homely curds, his cold, thin drink out of his leather bottle, his wonted sleep under a fresh tree's shade, all which secure and sweetly he enjoys, is far beyond a prince's delicates, his viands sparkling in a golden cup, his body couched in a curious bed, where care, mistrust, and treasons wait on him. Richard II, another weak king, is quite a different kind of character. Shallow, effeminate, and vain, he seems at first to be little more than a petty tyrant. But later in the play, as he gradually loses his friends, his army, his crown, and finally his life, Shakespeare manages to arouse some pity for him, as he is forced to realize himself that though he may have the soul of an artist, he hasn't the guts of a king. In the scene that follows, King Richard comes out on the battlements of Flint Castle, dressed in armor with a crown on his head and a scepter in his hand, attempting to defy and rebuke the rebellious Bolingbroke, his cousin, whom he banished from England, but has now returned to rouse the country against the king.
We are amazed, and thus long have we stood to watch the fearful bending of thy knee, because we thought ourselves thy lawful king. And if we be, how dare thy joints forget to pay their awful duty to our presence? If we be not, show us the hand of God that hath dismissed us from our stewardship. For well we know, no hand of blood and bone can gripe the sacred handle of our scepter, but that he do profane, steal, or usurp. And though you think that all, as you have done, have torn their souls by turning them from us, and we are barren and bereft of friends, yet know, my master, God omnipotent is mustering in his clouds on our behalf armies of pestilence, and they shall strike your children, yet unborn and unbegot, that lift your vassal hands against my head and threat the glory of my precious crown. Tell Bolingbroke, for yon methinks he stands, that every stride he takes upon my land is dangerous treason. He has come to ope the purple testament of bleeding war. But ere the crown he look for dwell in peace, 10,000 bloody crowns of mothers' sons shall ill become the flower of England's face, turn the complexion of her maid pale peace to scarlet indignation, and bedew her pastures grass with faithful English blood.
After a violent struggle with himself, King Richard surrenders.
O God, O God, that ere this tongue of mine that laid the sentence of dread banishment on yon proud man should take it off again with words of sooth. Oh, that I were as great as is my grief, or lesser than my name, or that I could forget what I have been, or not remember what I must be now. Swell'st thou, proud heart? I'll give thee scope to beat, since foes have scope to beat both thee and me. What must the king do now? Must he submit? The king shall do it. Must he be deposed? The king shall be contented. Must he lose the name of king? For God's name, let it go. I'll give my jewels for a set of beads, my gorgeous palace for a hermitage, my gay apparel for an almsman's gown, my figured goblets for a dish of wood, my scepter for a palmer's walking staff, my subjects for a pair of carved saints, and my large kingdom for a little grave, a little grave, an obscure grave. Or I'll be buried in the king's highway, some way of common trade, where subjects' feet may hourly trample on their sovereign's head. For on my heart they tread whilst now I live, and buried once, why not upon my head? Down, down I come, like glistering Phaethon wanting the manage of unruly jades, in the base court, where kings grow base to come at traitors' call and do them grace. In the base court, come down, down court, down king, for night owls shriek where mounting larks should sing.
Richard is brought back to London a prisoner and abdicates his crown before all the nobles of England in the great hall at Westminster.
Alack, why am I sent for to a king before I have shook off the regal thoughts wherewith I reigned? I hardly yet have learned to insinuate, flatter, bow, and bend my knee. Give sorrow leave a while to tutor me to this submission.
Yet I well remember the favors of these men. Were they not mine? Did they not sometime cry, all hail to me? So Judas did to Christ, yet he in 12 found truth in all but one. I in 12,000, none. God save the King. Will no man say amen? Am I both priest and clerk? Well then, amen. God save the King, although I be not he. And yet amen, if heaven do think him me. To do what service am I sent for hither? Give me the crown. Here, cousin, seize the crown. Here, cousin, on this side my hand, and on that side thine. Now is this golden crown like a deep well that owes two buckets filling one another, the emptier ever dancing in the air, the other down, unseen and full of water. That bucket down and full of tears am I, drinking my griefs whilst you mount up on high. Now mark me how I will undo myself. I give this heavy weight from off my head. And this unwieldy scepter from my hand. The pride of kingly sway from out my heart. With mine own tears I wash away my balm. With mine own hands I give away my crown. With mine own tongue deny my sacred state. With mine own breath release all duteous oaths. All pomp and majesty I do forswear. My manners, rents, revenues I forego. My acts, decrees, and statutes I deny. God pardon all oaths that are broke to me. God keep all oaths unbroke are made to thee. Make me that nothing have, with nothing grieved, and thou with all pleased, that hast all achieved. Long mayst thou live in Richard's seat to sit, and soon lie Richard in earthy pits. God save King Harry, un-King Richard says, and send him many years of sunshine day. Nay, all of you that stand and look upon, whilst that my wretchedness doth bate myself, though some of you with Pilate wash your hands, showing an outward pity, yet you, Pilates, have here delivered me to my sour cross, and water cannot wash away your sin. Oh, that I were a mockery king of snow, standing before the son of Bolingbroke, to melt myself away in water drop. Good king, great king, and yet not greatly good. And if my word be sterling yet in England, let it command a mirror hither straight, that it may show me what a face I have, since it is bankrupt of his majesty. Give me the glass, and therein will I read. No deeper wrinkles yet? The sorrow struck so many blows upon this face of mine and made no deeper wounds. Oh, flattering glass, like to my followers in prosperity, thou dost beguile me. Was this face the face that every day under his household roof did keep 10,000 men? Was this the face that like the sun did make beholders wink? Was this the face that faced so many follies, that was at last outfaced by Bolingbroke?
A brittle glory shineth in this face. As brittle as the glory is the face. Well, there it is, cracked in 100 shivers. Mark, silent king, the moral of this sport. How soon my sorrow hath destroyed my face.
Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherits, shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little life is rounded with a sleep.
Ages of Man. Sir John Gielgud stars in the one-man Shakespearean program held as a masterpiece. Here is Ages of Man Part 2 from Shakespeare's Plays and Sonnets in solo performance Sir John Gielgud.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling sea. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place 1,000,000, and let us, ciphers to this greater compt, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls is now confined 2 mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts, into 1,000 parts divide one man, and make imaginary puissance. Think, when we talk of horses, that you see them printing their proud hoofs in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass, for the which supply admit me chorus to this history, who prologue-like your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play.
And now an unlucky, jealous man, the febrile Cassius, trying to tempt the stoic Brutus to the murder of Julius Caesar. I cannot tell what you and other men think of this life. But for my single self, I had as lief not be, as live to be in awe of such a thing as I myself. I was born free as Caesar, so were you. We both are fed as well, and we can both endure the winter's cold as well as he. For once, upon a raw and gusty day, the troubled Tiber chafing with her shores, Caesar said to me, "Darest thou, Cassius, now leap in with me into yon angry flood and swim to yonder point?" Upon the word, accoutred as I was, I plunged in and bade him follow, so indeed he did. The torrent roared, and we did buffet it with lusty sinews, throwing it aside and stemming it with hearts of controversy. But ere we could arrive the point proposed, Caesar cried, "Help me, Cassius, or I sink." Aye, as Aeneas, our great ancestor, did from the flames of Troy upon his shoulder the old Anchises bear, so from the waves of Tiber did I the tired Caesar. And this man is now become a god, and Cassius is a wretched creature and must bend his body, if Caesar carelessly but nod on him. He had a fever when he was in Spain, and when the fit was on him, I did mark how he did shake. 'Tis true, this god did shake. His coward lips did from their colour fly, and that same eye whose bend doth o'er the world did lose his lustre. I did hear him groan. Aye, and that tongue of his that bade the Romans mark him and write his speeches in their books. Alas, it cried, give me some drink, Titinius, as a sick girl. Ye gods, it doth amaze me a man of such a feeble temper should so get the start of the majestic world and bear the palm alone. Why, man, he doth bestride this narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Here, for an interlude, is a poem from the passionate pilgrim called Sonnets to Sundry, which deals with one of Shakespeare's favorite themes, that of friendship and ingratitude. As it fell upon a day in the merry month of May, sitting in a pleasant shade which a grove of myrtles made, beasts did leap and birds did sing, trees did grow and plants did spring, everything did banish moan, save the nightingale alone. She, poor bird, as all forlorn, leaned her breast up till a thorn, and there sung the doleful ditty, that to hear it was great pity. Fie, 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 now would she cry, teru, by and by. That to hear her so complain, scarce I could from tears refrain, for her griefs so lively shown made me think upon mine own. Ah, thought I, thou mourn'st in vain, none take pity on thy pain. Senseless trees, they cannot hear thee, ruthless beasts, they will not cheer thee. King Pandion, he is dead, all thy friends are lapped in lead, all thy fellow birds do sing careless of thy sorrowing. Even so, poor bird like thee, none alive will pity me, whilst as fickle fortune smiled, thou and I were both beguiled. Every one that flatters thee is no friend in misery. Words are easy like the wind, faithful friends are hard to find. Every man will be thy friend whilst thou hast wherewith to spend, but if store of crowns be scant, no man will supply thy want. If that one be prodigal, bountiful they will him call, and with such like flattering pity but he were a king. If he be addict to vice, quickly him they will entice. If to women he be bent, they have at commandment. But if fortune once do frown, then farewell his great renown. They that fawned on him before use his company no more. He that is thy friend indeed, he will help thee in thy need. If thou sorrow, he will weep. If thou wake, he cannot sleep. Thus of every grief in heart, he with thee doth bear a part. These are certain signs to know faithful friend from flattering foe. And now Hamlet, a forthright Renaissance prince, trying to reconcile his conscience with the disillusionment he feels in the world around him. Now I am alone. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I! Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force his soul so to his own conceit that from its working all his visage wand, tears in his eyes, distraction in his aspect, a broken voice and his whole function suiting with forms to his conceit, and all for nothing, for Hecuba? What's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? What would he do had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have? He would drown the stage with tears, and cleave the general ear with horrid speech, make mad the guilty and appall the free, confound the ignorant, and amaze indeed the very faculties of eyes and ears. And I, a dull and muddy-mettled rascal, peaked like John a dreams, unpregnant of my cause, and can say nothing. No, not for a king, upon whose property and most dear life a damned defeat was made. Am I a coward? Who calls me villain, breaks my pate across, plucks up my beard and blows it in my face, tweaks me by the nose, gives me the lie of the throat as deep as to the lungs? Who does me this, huh? It's wounds. I should take it, for it cannot be that I am pigeon-livered and lack gall to make oppression bitter. Or ere this, I should have fatted all the region kites with this slave's offal, bloody, bawdy villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain! Oh, vengeance! Why, what an ass am I! This is most brave, that I, the son of a dear father murdered, prompted to my revenge by heaven and hell, must, like a whore, unpack my heart with words and fall a-cursing like a very drab, a scullion. Fie avaunt, for... But my brain. I have heard that guilty creatures, sitting at a play, have by the very cunning of the scene been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malefactions. For murder, though it have no tongue, will speak with most miraculous organ. I'll have these players play something like the murder of my father before mine uncle, and observe his looks. I'll tempt him to the quick if he but blench. I know my course. The spirit that I have seen may be the devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape. Yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. I'll have grounds more relative than this. The play is the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies. That she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. Thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best, simply I credit her false-speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore say not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me. And in our faults by lies we flattered be. When to the sessions of sweet, silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes, new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye, unused to flow, for precious friends hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances foregone, and heavily from woe to woe tell o'er the sad account of fore-bemoaned moan, which I knew pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored, and sorrows end. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. There ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire as on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed by that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Shakespeare never lived to be an old man, and we know very little about his private life. We cannot even tell whether the inspiration of his genius sprang principally from imagination, observing, or from his own personal experience. Certainly no poet wrote more wonderfully about the guilt of conscience, the agony of madness, and the black despair of sleepless nights. Here in 3 of his night scenes, we see 3 guilty men in different plays and in different moods. In the first, King Henry IV, that same Bolingbroke who deposed King Richard II and had him secretly put to death, wanders sad and ill through the corridors and rooms of his great palace at Westminster. How many thousand of my poorest subjects are at this hour asleep? Oh, sleep, oh, gentle sleep, nature's soft nurse, how have I frighted thee, that thou no more wilt weigh mine eyelids down and steep my senses in forgetfulness? Why, rather sleep liest thou in smoky cribs, upon uneasy pallets stretching thee, and hushed with buzzing night flies to thy slumber, than in the perfumed chambers of the great, under the canopies of costly state, and lulled with sounds of sweetest melody. O thou dull god, why liest thou with the vile in loathsome beds, and leav'st the kingly couch a watch case or a common larum bell? Wilt thou, upon the high and giddy mast, seal up the shipboy's eyes, and rock his brains in cradle of the rude imperious surge, and in the visitation of the winds which take the ruffian billows by the top, curling their monstrous heads, and hanging them with deafening clamor in the slippery shrouds, that with the hurly death itself awakes? Wilt thou, O partial sleep, give thy repose to the wet sea boy in an hour so rude, and in the calmest and most stillest night, with all appliances and means to boot, deny it to a king? Then
Happy low, lie down. Uneasy lies the head that wears a crown. But night falls with a different kind of terror on the castle of Inverness as the Scottish general Macbeth entertains King Duncan. Macbeth and his ambitious wife have long hoped to usurp the crown. And now the old king has been escorted to his lodgings. The doors are locked, the guards are set. The lights go out one by one in the windows of the castle. And Macbeth comes alone into the empty courtyard, preceded by a servant carrying a torch. Go, bid thy mistress, when my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell. Get thee to bed. Is a dagger that I see before me, the handle toward my hand. Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshalst me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. I see thee still, and on my blade and dudgeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. Now, o'er the one half world, nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offering, and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howls his watch. Thus, with his stealthy pace, the Tarquin's ravishing stride towards his design moves like a ghost. Thou sure and firm said earth, hear not my steps which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabout, and take the present horror from the time which now suits with it. Whiles I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. I go and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. The Duke of Clarence, thrown into the Tower of London on a false charge of high treason by his brother Richard of Gloucester, who is determined to seize the crown of England, wakes in his cell with a terrible foreboding. Oh, I have passed a miserable night, so full of fearful sights and ugly dreams, that as I am a Christian faithful man, I would not spend another such a night, though to buy a world of happy days. So full of dismal terror was the time. Methought that I had broken from the tower and was embarked to cross to Burgundy, and in my company my brother Gloucester, who from my cabin tempted me to walk upon the hatches. Thence we looked towards England, and sighted up 1,000 heavy times during the wars of York and Lancaster that had befallen us. As we paced along upon the giddy footing of the hatches, methought that Gloucester stumbled, and in falling struck me that sought to stay him overboard into the tumbling billows of the main. Lord, Lord, methought what pain it was to drown. What dreadful noise of water in mine ears. What ugly sights of death within mine eyes. Methought I saw 1,000 fearful racks 10,000 men that fishes gnawed upon. Wedges of gold, great anchors, heaps of pearl, inestimable stones, unvalued jewels, all scattered in the bottom of the sea. Some lay in dead men's skulls, and in those holes where eyes did once inhabit, there were crept, as 'twere, in scorn of eyes, reflecting gems that wooed the slimy bottom of the deep and mocked the dead bones that lay scattered by. Full often did I strive to yield the ghost, but still the envious flood kept in my soul, and would not let it forth to seek the empty, vast, and wandering air, but smothered it within my panting bulk, that almost burst to belch it in the sea. Oh, then began the tempest to my soul. I passed, methought, the melancholy flood, with that grim ferryman that poets write of, unto the kingdom of perpetual night. The first that there did greet my stranger soul was my great father-in-law, renowned Warwick, who cried aloud, "What scourge for perjury can this dark monarchy afford false Clarence?" And so he vanished. Then came wandering by a shadow like an angel, with bright hair dabbled with blood, and he squeaked out aloud, "Clarence is come! False, fleeting, perjured Clarence, that stabbed me in the field by Tewkesbury. Seize on him, Furies, take him to your torments. With that methought a legion of foul fiends environed me, and howled in mine ears such hideous cries, that with the very noise I trembling waked. And for a season after, could not believe but that I was in hell. Such terrible impression made my dream.
We now return to Sir John Gielgud in his internationally acclaimed one-man Shakespearean program, Ages of Man, Part 2.
From the fears and fantasies of sleep and dreams to the fears and fantasies of death itself, Claudio, Isabella's brother in Measure for Measure, condemned to death for fornication, cries out in prison on his cruel fate. Aye, but to die, and go we know not where, to lie in cold obstruction and to rot. This sensible, warm motion to become a kneaded clod, and the delighted spirit to bathe in fiery floods, or to reside in thrilling regions of thick-ribbed ice, to be imprisoned in the viewless winds, and blown with restless violence round about the pendant world, or to be worse than worst of those that lawless and uncertain thoughts imagine, howling. 'Tis too horrible. The weariest and most loathed worldly life that age, ache, penury, and imprisonment can lay on nature is a paradise to what we fear of death. But John of Gaunt, an old man dying in his palace at Lambeth, thinks only of his beloved country, and knowing that when his own influence is removed, the wild young king, his nephew Richard II, will drag England into ruin. Will the king come, that I may breathe my last in wholesome counsel to his unstayed youth? Oh, but they say the tongues of dying men enforce attention like deep harmony. When words are scarce, they're seldom spent in vain, for they breathe truth that breathe their words in pain. He that no more must say is listened more than they whom youth and ease have taught to glose. More are men's ends marked than their lives before. The setting sun
Music at the close, as the last taste of sweets is sweetest last, writ in remembrance more than things long past. Though Richard my life's counsel would not hear, my death's sad tale may yet undeaf his ear. Methinks I am a prophet new inspired, and thus expiring do foretell of him. His rash, fierce blaze of riots cannot last, for violent fires soon burn out themselves. Small showers last long, but sudden storms are short. He tires betimes that spurs too fast betimes. With eager feeding, food doth choke the feeder. Light vanity, insatiate cormorant, consuming means soon preys upon itself. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone, set in the silver sea which serves it in the office of a wall, or as a moat defensive to an house against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England, this nurse, this teeming womb of royal kings, feared by their breed and famous by their birth, renowned for their deeds as far from home, for Christian service and true chivalry, as is the sepulchre and stubborn jury of the world's ransom, Blessed Mary's Son. This land of such dear souls, this dear, dear land, dear for her reputation through the world, is now leased out. I die pronouncing it, like to a tenement or pelting farm. England bound in with a triumphant sea, whose rocky shore beats back the envious siege of watery Neptune, is now bound in with shame, with inky blots and rotten parchment bonds. That England that was wont to conquer others hath made a shameful conquest of itself. Ah, would the scandal vanish with my life? How happy then were my ensuing death.
Hamlet in his black clothes might seem to be the most characteristic death figure in all Shakespeare, but I have not found it to be so. Although he has a morbid streak in his nature, it seems to me that his overwhelming curiosity about life matches his curiosity about death. Here he speaks to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern about his change of feeling since his father's death. The possibility of suicide and seems to turn away from it. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns which patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. And enterprises of great pitch and moment, with this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Hamlet speaks to his friend Horatio, who has tried to dissuade him from accepting the challenge of Laertes to fight a duel. But thou wouldst not think how ill all's here about my heart. But it is no matter. 'Tis but foolery. It is such a kind of gain-giving as might perhaps trouble a woman. Not a whit. We defy augury. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, it is not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Since no man hath aught of what he leaves, what is't to leave betimes? Let be. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least, yet in these thoughts myself almost despising. Haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gates. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. The dirge from Cymbeline. Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thou thy worldly task hast done, home art gone, and ta'en thy wages. Golden lads and girls all must, as chimney sweepers, come to dust. Fear no more the frown of the great, thou art past the tyrant's stroke. Care no more to clothe and eat, to thee the reed is as the oak. The scepter, learning, physic must all follow this and come to dust. Fear no more the lightning flash, nor the all-dreaded thunderstone. Fear not slander, censure rash. Thou hast finished joy and moan. All lovers young, all lovers must consign to thee and come to dust. No exorciser harm thee, nor no witchcraft charm thee. Ghost unlaid forbear thee, nothing ill come near thee. Quiet consummation have, and renowned be thy grave. In studying the great tragedies, it seemed to me there was an effective contrast of two great scenes, death scenes, of youth and age. In the first, Romeo, whom we saw as a callow, impetuous boy at the beginning of the play, hears from his servant of Juliet's supposed death when he's in exile in Mantua. When the man tells him he has only one single line, Is it even so? Then I defy you, star. And he mounts his horse and rides furiously back to Verona. And there in the churchyard, where the Capulets are buried, he finds the Count of Paris who was to have married Juliet strewing flowers. And he attacks him savagely and stabs him to death. Then he breaks open the door of the Capulets' monument and drags the body in behind him. So we find him with the poison in his hand, looking down on the body of Paris, still warm at his feet, at the corpse of Tybalt, his first victim, as it lies there festering in its shroud. Then he sees Juliet, still beautiful, dressed in her wedding robes, lying on the catafalque with the candles burning around her. How oft, when men are at the point of death, have they been merry, which their keepers call a lightning before death? Oh, how may I call this a lightning? Oh, my love, my wife, death, that hath sucked the honey of thy breath, hath had no power yet upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, and death's pale flag is not advanced there. Tybalt, liest thou there in thy bloody sheet? Oh, what more favor can I do to thee than with that hand which cut thy youth in twain to sunder his that was thine enemy? Forgive me, cousin. Ah, dear Juliet, why art thou yet so fair? Shall I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous, and that the lean, abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour? For fear of that, I still will stay with thee, and never from this palace of dim night depart again. Here will I remain, with worms that are thy chambermaids. Oh, here will I set up my everlasting rest, and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. Eyes, look your last. Arms, take your last embrace. And lips, oh, you, the doors of breath, seal with a righteous kiss a dateless bargain to engrossing death. Come, bitter conduct, come, unsavory guide, thou desperate pilot, now at once run on the dashing rocks, thy seasick weary bark. Here's to my love. Oh, true apothecary, thy drugs are quick. Thus, with a kiss, I die. But King Lear, more than 80 years of age, who has dominated the early scenes of the tragedy with his violent rages and foolish tyrannies, is finally driven out of Gloucester's castle to lose his wits upon the heath and the storm, with only Mad Tom and the fool for company. Cordelia, his favorite daughter, whom he banished cruelly, returns to rescue her father from her wicked sisters. Her soldiers find the old man lunatic in the fields and bring him back to her tent, and there the doctor puts him to sleep, and he wakes to find Cordelia bending over him. Great rage is killed in him, and though the sisters win the battle, the old king hardly seems to care, as he goes happily into imprisonment, reunited with his beloved child.
No, no, no. Come, let's away to prison. We two alone will sing like birds i' the cage. When thou dost ask me blessing, I'll kneel down and ask of thee forgiveness. So we'll live and pray and sing and tell old tales and laugh at gilded butterflies and hear poor rogues talk of court news, and we'll talk with them too, who loses and who wins, who's in, who's out, and take upon us the mystery of things as if we were God's spies. And we'll wear out in a walled prison packs and sects of great ones that ebb and flow by the moon. Upon such sacrifices, my Cordelia, the gods themselves throw incense. Have I caught thee? He that parts us shall bring a brand from heaven and fire us hence like foxes. Wipe thine eyes. The good years shall devour them flesh and fell ere they shall make us weep. We'll see 'em starve first. Come.
But as the old king and Cordelia leave the stage hand in hand, like two children, we hear the terrible order of Edmund to the captain to hang Cordelia in the prison. When we see Lear for the last time, he is carrying the hanged body of Cordelia in his arms and looking half uncomprehendingly at the ring of faces, friends and enemies that gaze with horror on the scene. He thinks for a moment that she is alive again and dies on her body of joy.
Howl, 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 howl. Oh, you were men of stone. Had I your tongues and eyes, I'd use them so that heaven's vault should crack.
She's gone forever. I know when one is dead and when one lives. She's dead as earth. Lend me a looking glass. If that her breath will mist or stain the stone, why then she lives. This feather stirs. She lives. If it be so, it is a chance that does redeem all sorrows that ever I have felt. A plague upon you murderers, traitors all! I might have saved her. Now she's gone forever. Cordelia, Cordelia, stay a little. Now what is thou sayest? Shh. Her voice was ever soft, gentle and low, an excellent thing in woman. I killed the slave that was a-hanging thee, and my poor fool is hanged. No, no, no life. Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life? And thou no breath at all. Thou'lt come no more. Never. 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 Pray, undo this button. Thank you, sir. Do you see this? Look on her. Look. Her lips. Look there. Look.
Our revels now are ended. These our actors as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherits, shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a wreck behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. Good morrow, masters. Put your torches out. The wolves have prey, and look, the gentle day, before the wheels of Phoebus round about, dapples the drowsy east with spots of grey. Thanks to you all, and leave us, fare you well.